Are you thinking about taking a long trip, maybe many weeks or months with your RV, or maybe going full-time in your trailer? Hi, I'm Jen Grover. On this week's episode of Tab Talk, I'm going to talk about some very important things that you need to consider if you're planning long-term travel with your Tab. Stay tuned. Well, it's about 2 weeks after Ucamp, and I've already been to 3 campgrounds. This is my third. After Ucamp, I went to Potato Creek State Park in Indiana, which is a beautiful state park, very large sites, very lush, lots of lakes for kayaking, and there was a lot of fishing going on, a lot of birding at that park. But the internet wasn't very good, so I moved to Happy Acres Campground in Angola, Indiana. If you follow Travels with Delaney's YouTube channel, you may have heard of Happy Acres. They've been partnering with them to promote the campground and to help raise the profile of the campground. And while everything Patrick and Patty said was accurate about Happy Acres, the facilities are really nice, and you can tell a lot of work is going in to make it a better campground. There was one thing I really should have identified myself before I went. Happy Acres literally sits almost as close to I-69 as possible. There are billboards in the campground that are viewed from I-69. I was working, it wasn't a big deal for me, but if you're sensitive to road noise, this probably is not the campground for you. Because as amazing as the facility is, and it was spotless, I can tell you, the staff was friendly. I have no complaints about my experience whatsoever. The road noise, for people who are sensitive to road noise, would be too much. I'm at my favorite site in Findlay State Park in Ohio. Where I'm walking right now is the area where the campfire ring is, and it's directly behind my campsite. As you can see, the campsite is rather large and spacious. I'm going to spin around so you can see. You can see my Tab in the background, my chairs by the fire ring. It's just a ton of space, and Rocky and I have such a great time at this site. Should I tell you the site number? If I tell you the site number, then you may book it, and I may not be able to book it in the future. So I've told you the campground. Maybe I'll make you do the homework for the site number on your own. If you weren't at Ucamp, you may have missed a great time. Really, the people were so nice this year. It was an absolutely amazing event, and Ucamp went way above and beyond. They gave us steak and shrimp one night, cooked by their own production team, and a great Amish wedding dinner. The food was fabulous. The event was fabulous. The people were amazing. But for the second year in a row, we weren't without our weather challenges. After some off and on rain through the week, not a washout by any means, we did have severe storms Thursday night that led to, yet again, evacuating Winklepike Grove. The tornado sirens were sounding. However, we did not have a tornado or straight line winds this year. We mostly had hail. Yep, hail. Hail is like kryptonite to any RV, but especially those with aluminum, like an Airstream or our beautiful Tab trailers. Almost every camper at Winklepike had at least a little hail damage, and I believe almost every camper at nuCamp that was new, waiting to hit the truck, had hail damage as well. Now, as I understand it, so take that for what it's worth, it's pretty difficult to repair an aluminum roof from hail damage. And so the entire roof often needs to be replaced. Not an easy, simple, or cheap task. You're probably looking at anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. And so a lot of us are probably not going to get our roofs repaired. We got a couple dings. They're great memories from Ucamp, and they won't have a huge impact on the resale price of the trailer. But there are some who will have to replace the entire roof, and that's going to be a process for them. Maybe their dealers can do it. I know nuCamp Repair can do it, and they'll be busy repairing trailers for many months to come. But if you ask most of us who were there, if we knew that there was a risk of severe weather, would we go again? I think the answer is a resounding yes. 2 weeks ago, when I was at Ucamp, we held a discussion with people who were interested in full-time or a long trip type of travel with their Tab. We called it the Full-Timers Roundtable. And we really had a great discussion, talked about some interesting things, some of which I thought would be great content for a video, because I know a lot of people are interested in taking a super long cross-country trip, or maybe going in their Tab for months or a year or more. If you've been a follower of my channel for a couple years, then you know I have been injured while traveling. Now, thankfully, I was in Ohio. I had a ton of help from my friends at nuCamp, from my friend Dawn, who came to visit me, from my family, and everything worked out great for me. But you might be concerned about, what if something happens while I'm on the road? How will I handle it? How do I facilitate medical care? How do I take care of my tab? What about my pet? I'm going to dive into all those issues, plus some other issues you may want to consider if you're planning a long trip or maybe even planning to go full-time in your RV. I'm even going to talk about Starlink and my recent experience with it. It's new to me. I'm just testing it. I'm not done, so they're not final thoughts, but I'm going to give you my first impression and some basic information about it as a viable option for people who travel. So let's get started with this content right now. Are you thinking about taking a long trip or going full time? If so, I'd love to know who you are, so let me know in the comments below the video. One of the first things we talked about is how you handle insurance. Now, it's a great question, especially for those who are entering Medicaid. It's something you have to pay attention to. And it really goes beyond just insurance. You need to think about what happens if you get sick or injured and you need to be transported home or you need extended care. What happens to your RV or what happens to your pet in that case? I know I'd be worried if Rocky needed to be transported home to my brother's and I was halfway across the country. What would I do? Well, there are different options available. A lot of people aren't aware that Good Sam has another package that is geared toward a medical emergency, and it would transport you back home if you needed to. You can get a package that covers family or companions. It also can cover transportation and boarding of your pet. In addition to just covering you and helping arrange for your care, it can also arrange to have your tab and your tow vehicle transferred back to your home. And in a worst case situation, they'll even transport your remains back home should you die while you're traveling. If you have experience with either Good Sam, AAA, AARP, escapees, or another service that helps you with medical care, your tab, your tow vehicle, your pet while you're traveling, I'd love to hear the details about that, so please put that in the comments below. This isn't in lieu of your existing medical care. You need insurance, whether it be through Medicare, through your employer, or something you purchase yourself if you're self-employed like I am. But you do need to have a base medical insurance plan, and it's important you make sure that you choose a plan that covers you when you're out of region. A lot of Blue Cross Blue Shield plans will cover you when you're in another region. So if I'm in Wyoming and become injured, the rates negotiated with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming will cover the injury through my existing Blue Cross Blue Shield plan from Pennsylvania. I can't recommend a specific health insurance plan because they vary widely by state and even by region. I know the insurance options available for me in Western Pennsylvania are different than my friend in Central Pennsylvania. If your plans include traveling out of the country, you'll want to make sure that you have travel insurance for outside the U.S. That typically is not covered by your Blue Cross Blue Shield plan or other insurance plan. There is a plan through Blue Cross Blue Shield available called Geo Blue, and other insurance companies offer travel plans outside of the U.S. Check with organizations like Escapees, AARP, AAA, and other travel groups that offer this type of insurance because it's really important you have coverage if you're out of the country. Some countries will automatically cover you. I had a family member who had a medical emergency in France and he received care with zero bill. He was able to just walk out the door after receiving care. But I know in Canada, I'd be forced to pay out of pocket, and that's a lot of money. Another thing you're going to want to pay attention to is your mail. Now, if you're going full-time, you'll need to establish a domicile in a state. A lot of popular states for RVs include Florida, Texas, and South Dakota. South Dakota has a rule that you have to camp one night in South Dakota every 5 years to maintain your residency. But there's actually a campground that sort of specializes in that and has mail forwarding services available and other features to make it easy to establish your residency in South Dakota. Your domicile matters because you, if you're still employed, have to worry about taxes. Now, South Dakota does not have any state income tax, neither does Florida nor Texas. That's why they're popular for RVers. Also, you'll need a domicile established for voting. If you aren't moving to full-time and just taking a long trip and your domicile will stay in your home address, make sure you do what's needed to receive an absentee ballot in your state if you wish to vote while you're on the road. Everybody's home situation is going to be different, but you'll want to make sure you take care of things at home if you're not going full-time and keeping your home. Make sure somebody has availability to check in and keep track of your home for breaking and entering, temperature changes, make sure your furnace and air conditioner are working, and also just to make sure that there are no issues. I always turn off my water and turn down my hot water heater before I leave the house. I secure the windows and doors. I make sure that the furnace and air conditioner are in good working order. And I have cameras established so that I can monitor my home when I'm away. I also have friends who make it a habit as they're in the neighborhood to check the house to make sure everything's good there. And I have lawn care established while I'm gone. If you don't have a friend or family member who can help you, there are services that you can pay for to do that. I would check with a neighborhood app like Nextdoor, or maybe if you have an active Facebook group, for a good referral. And if you have somebody actually entering your home, make sure that they're bonded and insured. When it comes to your mail, make sure that you have a way to get to it in case there's an unexpected important piece of mail that comes your way. Sometimes you may forget that you have a credit card expiring, or you have a new insurance policy coming, or maybe you've got something from the IRS that you need to have forwarded to you. These are all important and you want a way to get to your mail. So whether it's a family member or a service, make sure that you have a way to get to the mail if you need it. It's easy to get wrapped up in the what ifs, and you should think about it and you should have a plan, but don't let that paralyze you from getting out there and following whatever dream you have of traveling. Now, a lot of you know internet is a big deal for me because I work remotely, and working is my number one priority even when I'm traveling. So I want to make sure I have a great data connection. To date, I've typically used primarily just a MiFi hotspot pack from Verizon and planned on doing a lot of research before I go to a location. For the most part, that has worked out for me exceedingly well. But it does limit where I can camp. So this year, after trying my friend Alan's Starlink, I decided to give it a try. Now, this video isn't going to be about Starlink. I'll do another video on that in the future. I'll give you brief details today and my initial reactions. If you're getting Starlink and you plan to travel with it, you need to make sure that you select the Roam service. Now, there are two types. Roam, which is what most of us get right now, it's $149 a month. And that gives you access to anywhere in North America to use your Starlink. You do have what they call deprioritized access, meaning your data speeds can be throttled due to network capacity. Now, Starlink involves a dish, a router, both provided by Starlink, and then the cable that connects them together in a power cable. That's it. That's the only equipment required. There are two types of dishes that you can get. One is the typical one that you see. The first generations were these little round dishes with a tripod stand, and the newer ones are a rectangle version. So they sit outside of your camper, and that's what gets the internet or receives the internet from the satellites in the sky. The portable dish is $599, so basically $600. They do offer one that you can mount to your vehicle and you can use in use. So you could mount it to your tow vehicle or you could mount it to your trailer. That's a little pricier. It's about $2,500. There are some DIY kits out there through Etsy, through some other providers that allow you to take a traditional rectangle dish and make it a mounted version, or make it one that you can mount. I think some allow you to do still the portable or the mounted, but those kits are still around $1,200 or $1,300. I went with the portable kit that was $599. I wasn't ready to invest in anything permanent, and I'm not sure I want that mounted on my tab anyway, because you do have to have an open sky to the north to receive Starlink. Otherwise, it's going to be interrupted, and that just won't work for business. In addition to the hardware, you're going to have a monthly fee. Now, that service fee is only charged for the months that you use it. You can deactivate or pause Starlink on the months that you're not traveling, which is very attractive to me. But on the months that I'm traveling for what they call regional service, which gives me access in North America, so that includes Mexico and Canada, it's only $149.99 a month. So it's $150 a month. I said only, really $150 is quite a chunk of change, especially if it's not going to work pretty amazingly. Once you exceed 1 terabyte of use for data use, your speeds can be throttled. I've heard mixed messages, some say yes, some say no. Your speeds are also considered deprioritized automatically with the roam plan. So if you're in an area, especially on the East Coast, this is going to matter, where there's a lot of Starlink use in an area, your speeds are going to be a little slower. Now, that being said, a deprioritized speed for me has been anywhere from 40 to 60 megabits per second, which is more than ample for video calls on Teams. I spend a lot of my day on video calls, so it's super important to me that I have great coverage. What I like about Starlink are the great speeds and that I'm able to get service where I can't have data service. I actually ended up at a state park in Indiana the week after Ucamp that I thought had good data speeds based on other reviews. I got there and had no data speeds whatsoever. Now, maybe there was a tower down due to storms, but for whatever reason, I had no speeds. I was able to connect with Starlink. Due to obstructions in the clear view of the sky, I wasn't able to get uninterrupted Starlink access, however. Every 10 to 15 minutes, I'd lose connection for about 15 seconds, which is super annoying if you're on an hour-long call and my signal keeps getting dropped. I really hated it, so I moved to another area where I could have better connection speeds. I think I'll truly see the value from Starlink when I travel west and have more open skies, but just like this campsite here, I'm not able to get Starlink at all because of tree obstructions, and that is a problem if I'm relying on Starlink only. I still have my MiFi hotspot, and I'm still using that for data speeds, but at this point, if I was just camping in the east, I would say Starlink is not worth it. I'm willing to give it a little more time to see if the value justifies the cost, but right now, I'm not sure if I'm going to be keeping it on a long-term basis. So stay tuned. I'll do a more extensive report after I've really had some time to try it in different spots. One thing, if you're considering Starlink, that you should think about is how you will protect it from getting run over. I've seen a lot of videos and a lot of stories about people's Starlink getting run over. I know that there was even one that got hit by a truck at Ucamp because it's low to the ground and people can't see it. A lot of users will use a Harbor Freight flagpole and buy a bushing that you can buy either on Etsy or Amazon that slides into the top of the pole and that you can mount your Starlink into. And they seem very happy with that solution. I haven't done that yet. I probably will, but I've only had the Starlink a few weeks and I wanted to first try it on the ground before I went that route. To protect it, I'm typically putting it on a small camp table or putting it in a spot where it's extremely unlikely that anybody would be putting a vehicle. Now, a lot of times people think I can put it in my yard in the campground, but I've sat around campground since I got my Starlink and watched how people back into campsites, and they often pull right into my site to back their big, huge camper into their site. So I don't think leaving it on the ground is a great long-term solution, so I'll probably be getting a flagpole. That's not to say I won't still mount it on the ground, but I'll continue using a camp table. I've even thought about getting a cone or something to help draw attention to the fact that it's there. The other thing you have to be careful of in campgrounds is that lawnmowers don't run over your cables. From what I understand, it's pretty common for the cables to go bad, so I'm probably going to get a spare cable. That way, if it goes bad while I'm traveling, I have a cable. The cable that comes with the Starlink is 75 feet, and they offer a 150-foot cable, so I'll probably buy the 150-foot cable as my backup cable. Right now, there's no proprietary port that matches that cable. The Starlink has a proprietary cable from the dish to the router, and that end of that cable is not going to fit through your typical RV hatch unless you get just a cable pass-through hatch, which would probably be a little oversized, truthfully, for the Starlink cable. Because I haven't decided if I'm definitely keeping the Starlink, I haven't done anything like that. I'm just running it between the window shade and the window screen in my bottom-up, top-down shade screen combo in my tab. But if I do decide to keep it permanently, I will be looking at what I can do to make that whole setup a little more seamless, a little quicker, and a little more impervious to bugs entering the tab. There are some DIY solutions for both the cable, being able to route that via Ethernet through the tab, as well as for powering it over what's called power over Ethernet and providing 12-volt power for the Starlink router. They do require cutting your cables and splicing and putting on some different ends. I'm not comfortable with that yet, and I do anticipate as demand grows and use cases grow, Starlink or another company will provide an alternative that you can buy that's clean and neat, and I'll wait for that. If it doesn't happen quickly, maybe by next year, I might consider installing a pass-through hatch, but I'm not ready to do anything permanent at this point. The one thing I'll say about working remotely and internet is to make sure that you have a backup plan, because I've worked in places where the cellular data worked great on Monday, but by Wednesday it didn't due to a wildfire in the area taking out a cell tower, or even when tourists come to an area, a tower gets overwhelmed and it pulls the data speeds way down to a drag. So make sure you have a backup plan in case you need to get internet access while you're traveling. Planning a long trip or going full-time is really exciting, but it's important to have a backup plan and make sure that your health and your tab and your pets are all covered while you're on the road. What else would you add that's important if you're planning a long-term trip that people may not think of or that they may forget to take care of before they travel? Why don't you put that information in the comments below? If you find this video helpful, it really helps me if you go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. And if you appreciate my videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button. The algorithm recognizes that and helps promote the content to other people who need to see it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.